Gorla è un borgo che diventa parte del...
Although the suburb of Gorla only became part of the city of Milan in 1923, its history has very ancient roots. The origin of the name Gorla derives from the vulgar Gorula, meaning hollow or valley, because its history is tied to ancient Mediolanum. In 3000 BC, this area was the Pomerio, the territory controlled by the Roman army. The most important transformation took place during the Renaissance, when the Martesana Canal was opened. Its waters changed the fate of Gorla, turning it first into a sort of vacation resort for people from the city, and later powering the water wheels used to produce energy for local industries during the 1800s. The 20th century marked significant change for Gorla, beginning with its annexion to Milan, but also due to the Second World War, which left behind many scars. The area we see nowadays is mainly a result of reconstruction carried out after the war. A walk around Gorla today shows us traces of what it used to be. For example, the Villa Finzi, a public park named after its last owners, now contains schools and other public services, but its history dates back to the late 1700s, when one of the first villas was constructed right beside the Martesana Canal. This villa was surrounded by land, which is for its owner, Prince Battiani, an Hungarian general of the Austrian army who had lived in Milan before buying the villa, used it to create an English garden. In this garden, full of picturesque elements, he also created an artificial lake, in addition to a greenhouse and two small temples. One of these temples is called the Temple of Innocence, with a beautiful dome of wisteria replacing the original one. The second one, known as the Temple of the Night, is concealed underground, beneath a hill considered by archaeologists to be one of the most important hypogeal cavities of the city. An opening of the summit of the hill allows the light to penetrate the temple. Just outside the park, in Via Sant'Elembardo, we can find the Crespi Morbio Foundation, established by the Crespi brothers, Milanese businessmen who wanted to create a housing complex for a large family. They asked Emilio Lancia, the famous rationalist architect, to design and build the complex designed for lower-income families. It includes 9 apartment buildings and is full of open spaces meant for children's enjoyment and play. The foundation still provides housing for families in need and is now managed by the city. It also includes several important cultural entities, for example, the Teatro Officina. In 1930, Gorla was split in two by the construction of the Viale Monza, a street marking the transformation and progress of various means of transport, culminating in the arrival of the subway in 1964. Continuing along the street, we found 2 churches. When Gorla was part of the municipality and parish of Turro, people had to cross the Martesana Canal in order to go to the church. And so, in 1600, they petitioned Federico Borromeo to let them build a church on their side of the canal. Nothing remains of that church. It was later replaced by another one in 1800, which still exists, the Church of San Bartolomeo, a small white lime edifice with a red brick bell tower. Next to it stands the Church of Santa Teresa del Gesù, dating from 1920, when Gorla was detached from the Turro parish. Facing the church is an old farmhouse which can be found in the maps dating from the 1600s. Until 10 years ago, it housed a restaurant, but even in the old maps, it was marked as a tavern, the Osteria della Segale, because of its position in the middle of rye and wheat fields. This farmhouse lies near a widening of the canal, where travelers could moor their boats and find refreshment at the tavern. Closer to the canal, we can find a square called Piazza dei Piccoli Martiri di Gorla, Square of the Little Martyrs, evocative to the tragic events that took place here. Close by is the Ponte Vecchio, Old Bridge, the first real bridge over the canal, erected in 1703. Next to it, there is another beautiful villa, the Villa Singer, property of a Milanese family who vacationed there in the 1800s. Its present owner has restored it and plays host to film sets and other events. There were many villas in this part of Gorla, which can be seen in photos of the epoch but no longer exist today. The last trace of the Villa Angelica, built for the wife of Count Fender, is a small tower in neo-medieval style. In 1950, in place of these villas, a monastery was erected dedicated to St. Clare for the poor Clare nuns of the Franciscan order. Settling in Milan before the war, in 1950, the nuns commissioned Giovanni Muzio, architect of many famous buildings in Milan, the Triennale for example, to build the monastery. The site was chosen to embrace a tragic historical moment attached in the memory of its citizens. In the middle of Gorla main square, once stood the Francesco Crespi Elementary School. On the morning of October 20, 1944, it was completely destroyed by a bomb, meant for the Breda weapons factory in Sesto San Giovanni, but dropped too soon during a normal school morning. More than 2,000 people were killed, most of them children. To this day, the exact circumstances of the bombing remain unclear, but in the history of Milan, this event is known as the Tragedy of Gorla and will never be forgotten.
Nel 1944 a Milano i bombardamenti sulla città, tempo di dolori e di lacrime.
Today, in the place where the school used to be, there is a monument to the little kids once killed in these tragic episodes. This monument was commissioned by the parents of the children so that their history would never be forgotten. Under the monument is a large crypt containing the remains of the victims. If we cross the Ponte Vecchio and head towards Viale Monza, we can see numerous cottages attesting to the rural nature of the area. One important building is the Circolo Ricreativo Operaio of Gorla, a historical edifice built after World War II as a place for social gatherings. Many famous actors performed there, and in 1880, it became the home of Zelig. Continuing on, we pass under the Viale Monza Bridge, erected after 1950, when the waters of the canal were declared no longer navigable. The original bridge was designed by the same architect as the Regio Imperiale di Alone, or what nowadays we call Viale Monza. It was destroyed in order to facilitate the construction of the sidewalk. Further on, we come to Via Tofania. On the left, there are old farmhouses, while on the right, there is an old spinning mill which used the water power of the canal to run machines transforming silver into precious fabrics. Gorla is also known as the Little Paris because its heart, the central monument square, bears a slight resemblance to Paris, with the waters as our protagonist, the Martesana Canal, flowing through it. The Martesana, commissioned by Francesco Sforza in 1400 in order to connect Lake Como to Milan, has been a fundamental element of change in the history of Gorla and remains important to this day.